Lesson 1, be heroic to your CEO. What does that mean to you? Well, in the opening quest, I talked about this idea of being heroic. More specifically, I talked about the letter H, the letter E, the letter R, and O. In this module, we'll be adding 2 more letters, I and C, impactive and collaborative. And we'll talk about that. What does it mean to be holistic, engineered, reality-based, ongoing, impactive, and collaborative? That's what it means to be heroic. As we explore that, let me ask you a question. What is leadership to you? What does it mean to lead in the commercial enablement space? What does it look like? What does it feel like? What are some of the things that you are focused on if you are a leader? And what are some of the things you're focused on if you are not a leader? Who determines what leadership looks like? And then here's a good question. What if what everybody's looking for in a leader is not necessarily required to help the company achieve the business strategy? What if the people in the business don't know what great enablement leadership even looks like? What do you do then? What do leaders do? And how do they create the environment to get things done? Take a moment and reflect on this question before you move on. It's really important to think about and understand your mindset with regard to leadership, especially leading a commercial enablement initiative or function. Pause this video here and reflect on that. What does it mean to be a good leader? And as a friendly reminder, don't forget to get your participant guide down. We're in module 2, and in this lesson, you'll have some worksheets that you can fill out and things you can do to help you explore. So let's keep moving. Your company needs your leadership. A new way of doing business is emerging. The old approach may not be working. Also, the new role of enablement is emerging, and their expectations around the role continue to elevate. We're in the experience economy, and the experiences that salespeople create and communicate are critical to the strategy of your company. How are you specifically impacting those experiences? How are you helping salespeople? How are you enabling them? From a sales perspective, bringing together the right systems, the right processes, the tools, the people, all of those things, creating those ingredients, bringing them together requires leadership. Much like the driver of a race car, a commercial enablement leader has the ability to keep the sales organization streamlined and supported by providing the great support and alignment to the objectives. How well are you in tune with the strategy of the company, the business strategy of the company, the sales strategy of your company, and what salespeople need in order to drive their race car? How can you free them up? How can you simplify? How do you practice and give them what they need so that they'll be successful? It's not enough to just have those processes and tools understood. You also have to influence and make sure people understand what you're providing so they can focus on the right thing. In our earlier module, module 1, we talked about the attributes of an orchestrator. In this particular lesson, we'll be talking about prioritizing the right goals at the right moments. And that means understanding the hero's journey that you're on over time. That means you also have to understand the trade-off and decision points you need to make between accomplishing something overly tactical that's not necessarily linked to the strategy, or spending time on strategy at the expense of getting things done. It's a balancing act. And that's the key theme about being a leader in the commercial enablement space. It's the trade-offs and the balancing act that require a sound approach and for you to think things through before they actually happen. Leaders do the right things. We'll call that strategy. And they also achieve the right results. We'll call that tactics. When you look at the strategy, such as building out an enablement platform, supporting salespeople and a different portfolio of sales teams with different experiences, creating this approach, this strategy, this architecture that supports and evolves and emerges and drives the right type of action requires a lot of architecture. It requires you to think things through, design it out before you implement. At the same time, getting the right results, such as increasing pipeline, launching SMB or supporting SMB, helping salespeople get the skills they need. That means staying in tune with what's happening in sales conversations and spending the time with sales to understand not only what they need, but also what they want, so that you can help balance this challenge of meeting them where they're at and helping evolve to where they need to be. Now, it's important to note that on the Orchestrate Sales website, Scott Santucci and I have a lot of podcasts around this very thing, this idea of balancing strategy and tactics. I encourage you to listen to these podcasts periodically to reground yourself on this balancing act, because this is the essence of leadership in many ways. There's so many variables here in this middle space between strategy and results. Because we're taught in sales that we can only impact what we can control. Well, what if control is a myth? What if we can't control anything in the new economy? What do we do then? And then also, how do we determine what to do and why we're doing it? What are these things that matter? Who determines what matters? Is it based on our own skill and our own comfort level? Or is it based on something else, like the strategy? Let's look at it this way. There are things that you can do, and there are things that you can do that really matter. How do you do both? Again, trade-offs. That's the sweet spot. This is the job of your role as an orchestrator, to lead in this space, to figure out what really matters and why balancing the things you can control and also the things that matter are based on your external perspective. It's a challenge. But tackling that challenge can pay off big time for your company. Here's an example of something that Scott Santucci put together. And he talked about what happens when you get in early. When you get in early, when the salespeople get in early and they're able to frame out a challenge and a vision with executives, what does that mean in terms of deal sizes? Look at the impact of shaping out a vision, of spending time on not only what we can control, but also what matters. And thinking about what matters to executives here is completely different than what matters to first line people. The challenge is that this outcome requires blending a lot of different capabilities in your company. This is really important to consideration. Have you thought about that? How does all this come together in the view and the eyes of your customer? How does it all come together? How would you answer that? A lot of times we say, well, sales sells. That's what they do. They bring it all together. But outside the company, in your client base, really nobody owns a specific outcome. They're looking at each other and they're trying to figure out what to do. And your salespeople help navigate that, especially if they're getting in early. And framing out that vision and framing out that executive level challenge and then aligning everybody internally, guess what? That's the same challenge that you'll have as a commercial enablement orchestrator. You're going to have to actually bring people together who don't necessarily report into you. You'll also have to build bridges and help people see what needs to be done. And maybe they have their own agendas. Well, guess what? This is the same thing that salespeople need to do inside their client companies. Your role is not that unique from theirs. In fact, I would say the more you explore that, the more alike your role can become. So because nobody owns the customer alignment in the customer's organization, salespeople have to connect those dots. This is the kind of proactive thinking and action that sets up leading in this role of being a commercial enablement orchestrator. This is how you start thinking about being heroic to your leadership team. This is an example of doing the right things and doing those things right. And we called that stratacution, and we'll explore more about that. But embracing the fact that there's a business strategy that perhaps says, look, we've got to sell earlier, we have to get higher. Let's figure out how we help executives understand our value as a company. Embracing that and realizing that it's not so simple just to give a demo and saying there's a lot of complexity, there's a lot of things that we can do. What's the right thing to do? And we'll explore that. So let's first start thinking about and applying this, thinking like an orchestrator. Let's get out your participant guide and talk it through. It looks like this. All right, so thinking like an orchestrator. Module 2, lesson 1. Why don't you go ahead and grab it? Module 2, lesson 1. There are 3 boxes here. Take your participant guide, open it up. If you need time, pause this video right now and go get it. The value in this course is actually taking action. So I want you to do that. Take action. Do it now. Grab your participant guide, open it up. Module 2, lesson 1. And I want you to take a minute and pause this video and do that activity. So pause the video now. All right, welcome back. Did you identify a current priority that's strategic in nature? Did you jot down what are the things that really matter? And what are the things that you really can control? Now, the trade-off here is the things that really matter, they actually might be outside of your control. The things that really matter might actually be part of the ecosystem challenge that you're operating within, and that's okay. And that's where your influence comes from, and that's where your leadership opportunity is the ability to go after the things that really matter. What we don't want to have happen is say, well, you know, that's not my job. Tackling that is so big, it's not my job. That is the opposite of taking a leadership stance. That's the opposite of being an orchestrator. Now, throughout this course, I'm going to give you some tools and some techniques to help you do this. The key here on the front end is to understand that this is indeed bigger than what you are probably doing right now. And if it is something you are currently doing, then developing the techniques to do it even better will help you, and it will come from this course. So if this is feeling a little bit big, that's okay. Just be comfortable in the uncomfortable. That's part of this process. So let's continue. This is what I put together based on my activity. I said, you know, there's a product launch, there's a new cloud platform, there's ongoing releases. I have to keep up with those things as an orchestrator. And for us to be successful as a company, what really matters is salespeople get access and they can have the right kind of conversation. To have the right kind of conversation, they have to understand our value, and they have to understand what to say when they're in front of these executives. So that's something that is what matters, whether I can control it or not. And then there's what I can control. I can control my time, I can control my resources, and I have direct control over onboarding, let's say, and I can control what's there. Now, thinking this through, what can I do? Right? When I think like an orchestrator, I find myself in a position where I have clarity on the outcome, but I don't necessarily know exactly how to get it, how to achieve it. And that's what we're going to tackle in this module. I also might realize that this is huge. and I'm thinking too small. And that's something that we will tackle in this module. I also will realize that I have to rely on other people, other functions, other teams. And that's something we will start tackling as well. And that's okay. That's what orchestration is. They're not hiring, your executive team doesn't want to hire siloed people. Your executive is looking for somebody to connect the dots. We talked about that. Because orchestration brings together strategy and tactics and helps you and the company, your company, respond to customers, anticipate demand, optimize the value, improve competitiveness. There are a lot of ways that people can go about tackling this picture. But when you think about the role of functions and departments that are across the organization, and as what it means to be a great leader, it means understanding that there are things that you can do to drive the strategy, and then there's really what matters to help salespeople have the right kind of conversations. The vision is to elevate commercial enablement, to make an impact. And you want to become the execution-focused organization that is really like the go-to function when a change needs to happen, when something needs to occur. How do people recognize that enablement is on point and as a leadership role? That means you'll have to figure out how to yourself respond to demand, or how to improve your own competitiveness of your function, or optimize the value of what you're providing. Orchestration allows you to test and learn. It allows you to try new things. It allows you to work on your interpersonal skills, and it helps you help people see, creating new visuals, perhaps, visualizing what it means to work together, developing principles and approaches that bring people together. Where else can you learn that? And that's what's required to orchestrate. So we'll figure that out together, and you can apply some of these things as you're going. So in the workbook, again, if you see the visual up here in the top right corner, that means workbook. In the participant guide or workbook, there's a strategic planning canvas. I want you to open that up, and again, take from your first exercise, but this idea of what is a strategic priority. I want you to define that strategic priority and describe it in the left-hand column. And then I want you to describe the results, define what success would look like, think about how to prioritize, and help you determine what actions you can take. So just write it down. Just document what you're thinking. What is your point of view? So on the left, what are your strategic priorities? Then think about and determine what is coming at you. What is likely to come at you in the enablement function? Write that down. Then think about the ongoing initiatives that you have and write those down. And then where are you innovating? What are you doing to innovate? Are you learning a new technique? Are you learning a new approach? Are you trying something different? Are you testing new technology? Are you testing new delivery methods? Where are you innovating? And then define the results that you need to get. The results can be obviously measurable results. They can also be a little bit more qualitative. What kind of feedback do you want to get? What kind of inputs do you want to receive? Define those results as well. And think about this over the course of 12 months. So what are your strategic priorities over the next 12 months? What's likely coming at you over the next 12 months? What are you going to be working on? What are you going to be innovating? And what results do you want to have? Think big picture and plan this out. You have 3 rows here, so you can actually list out and use these boxes how you want to. Pretty flexible. The key is to dump something out. It doesn't have to be right, but take a stab at it, pause the video, and think through the next 12 months and jot down what you can. If you have questions, you can chat them in the group. All right, pause the video and give it a shot. All right. Did you do it? Did you give it a shot? One of the things that comes out when you do this is when you take the time to define on the left side what you're currently working on, and then go to the right side and define what the results you get. There are there are things that you do in the middle, and there are things that you have control over, and there are things that are coming at you. And a great orchestrator is able to take that momentum that's being generated from across the organization and figure out how to align and achieve cohesion across these initiatives to drive the result. In other words, piggybacking on existing initiatives, trying to innovate in an existing initiative, creating new initiatives that fill gaps in order to achieve the results and do what matters. So that might have been a hard exercise. If that's the first time you've done something like that, where you're thinking big picture and what can you use and what can you do. But I hope you found during that exercise that it's helpful to think through all of the resources you do have, and all of the support you do have, and all of the people you can work with, and all of the initiatives you can tap into, and all of the communication that you can do. There are a lot of possibilities when you take this type of inventory. The key is to align to the strategy and to get done what you can with what you can control, which is the essence of leadership. So as you move forward and tackle these complex challenges, your perspective matters. And perspective is critical to your success as a leader. How we stop doing the random, and how do we start becoming heroic to the executive team? How do we tap into our initiatives, and how do we drive tactical action? Well, you can either look at it as doing what matters, driving strategy, and then tactics, or you can look at it as tactical execution. What's the vision you have for your function? If I were to take the perspective of, I want to be heroic to the leadership team, it means being holistic and engineered, focused on reality, ongoing operation, impactive and collaborative. When you think about these heroic actions, each one of these actually has an opposite reaction. I can actually become stopped in my random acts. I can be siloed instead of holistic. I can be totally time bound instead of taking an engineered approach. I can be obtuse and speak in generalities as opposed to what's specifically happening. I can focus only on projects and tasks instead of ongoing operations. I can try to make everybody happy instead of developing impactive communication. I can get defensive instead of collaborative. That my approach is the right way to do it. So we see in commercial enablement today a lot of the right side siloed thinking. I see a lot of pleasing what people are asking for. And then I see some defensiveness that happens when we start asking people to justify what they're doing and why they're doing it. This is an important distinction in the leadership view that you have. On the right, it's very tactical and you're an order taker. Now, if you're in sales enablement, it's very likely that your company is asking you to help salespeople stop being order takers. Yet we're setting up our functions to be order takers. That creates a dissonance, a challenge in actually living out the very thing we're trying to teach. At the same time, for us to become heroic, we have to be a lot more specific, and we have to be a lot more precise in how we're thinking. We need to develop our own thought structures in order to have a point of view. And again, in sales, if you think about it, you're probably in the business of helping salespeople communicate a point of view that's disruptive, that changes things. Are you doing that as a leader in sales enablement and commercial enablement? Are you developing your own point of view and communicating that to disrupt things in your own organization? What if you treated your own organization as a microcosm of the challenges that salespeople have as they navigate clients? What if you did that? How would that impact you? And what would that look like? It's a journey. Remember that. This is a journey over time. Orchestrators do both. They get the right things done by doing the right things. That means we're tackling the current state, which is stopping the random acts where we are totally reactive and developing an approach to achieve the future state so that we can be heroes to the executive team by figuring out what really works. Now, what this might feel like is, well, we are moving away from doing things that people are asking for. Well, in a way, we're freeing up some time to tackle what really needs to be tackled. But how do we decide what to do and how to do it? We can't just say it's our way, right? There's a lot internally that we would have to help people realign to. It's a lot to figure out. But the question here as a leader in the business is, what is the value of enablement? Is the value of enablement to do what people say and to take orders and to regurgitate somebody else's point of view? Or is the value of enablement to develop an approach and develop a strategy and have a point of view that enables salespeople to have the right conversations and figuring out and developing an approach to figuring out what actually works? Because let's face it, a lot of the things that we put out as enablement leaders don't actually work and they don't actually get used. So let's not fool ourselves into thinking that our role is important because it has the title enablement in it. Let's get real and ask ourselves, how do we know if people are using what we put out? How can we prove the impact we're having with our customers, with our company's customers? How do we prove our value to executives? These are fair questions. And these are questions of leadership, of your leadership. And having a point of view about that is critical. So let's talk about what that looks like. Now, we've talked about current state, future state. And I've been hinting at the essence of leadership is understanding where you currently are and where you want to be. And we're going to talk about that some more. And I want you to do this activity, and I want you to go to your workbook and get that activity for module 2. Because I'm going to give you permission to confront reality, and I want you to define it. And I want you to talk about and think about and develop some structure around the current state and the future state, not to be negative, but to go get the facts. I don't want you to put your head in the sand either. And in essence, understanding the reality might actually point to something you hadn't discovered before. And it actually may confirm that you're on the right track. So it doesn't have to be a negative thing. But what I want you to do is I want you to pause the video and make a commitment to identify the random acts of sales support that are holding you back and taking away from what's really important. I want you to inventory and list out those random acts. And I want you to identify what it would look like to replace those random acts with something else, something more heroic. What would that look like? And how would you define it on the right side? So what are those random acts? And this is an interesting one because we are busy and we are stressed and we have a lot of work going on. Is it valuable? Is it valuable? Valuable to who? Where did it come from? Who's asking for it? So these are important questions to think about as you continue the module. So pause the video here, list out any random acts on the left, replace those random acts on the right. Go ahead and stop the video before continuing. All right, welcome back. So I plotted these out in a journey. The current state is on the top and the bottom is the future state. Don't get too wrapped around the visual. It's just a cycle. And the reason why the current state is on the top is because it's what we see, and it's easier for us to understand because it's right in front of us is what we see. The stuff that's below the surface here is the future state. We have to figure out what that looks like. We have to figure out how to tackle it. And if you want to explore this concept further, think about this as a hero's journey. If you're going to be heroic, let's put you on the hero's journey. Let's talk about what it means to engage in your environment and to become heroic. The hero's journey is actually a paradigm and a historical fact. Humans engage in a story. If you look up Joseph Campbell, you'll understand the hero's journey a little bit more. The hero's journey here is an example of moving from the current state where you're reacting to what's happening to a future state where you figure out what really works and why it really matters. So let's talk about the hero's journey here and break each of these down. On the left, you'll see the orchestrator view. Oh, I'm sorry. On the right, you'll see the orchestrator view, the future state view. And on the left, you'll see the current state view that a lot of us experience. And the orchestrator's journey starts with moving from the left to the right, from being siloed to being more holistic. Okay. So what does that look like? And how do you do it? If you take those two boxes here, on the right side, we're being more holistic to drive the future state by seeing the system over time. What system? What system are we seeing over time? Well, it's the commercial system. It's our company's ability to drive bookings. There's a system in that view, not a technology system, but all the moving parts. All the moving parts across marketing, product, sales, etc. And we take a systems thinking view in that. And we'll explore this concept more as we continue through this course. So don't worry about not necessarily understanding all these details. We'll explore these more over time in this course. In this particular lesson, it's just important to understand the difference between what we might be used to on the left versus what is valuable to executives on the right. Seeing the whole picture, having a clear vision, these are valuable statements, valuable things to executives. Let's move on to T and E, moving from temporal or time bound to engineered. Engineered is seeing the parts and components as something that's part of that ecosystem. Improving results by modifying and controlling different inputs, working backwards from measurable objectives, having a clear vision, thinking in terms of 80-20, thinking like an engineer, versus time bound on the left, where we're reactive based on the calendar. Now, this one in particular, when I talk about this, is tough because we're so time bound in sales. We're taught that sales is a numbers game, right? So what does that mean? And how does that look? How do you reconcile it's a numbers game, activity driven, calendar, with the need to figure out and drive the strategy? Let's talk about O and R. From a R perspective, reality, it's how the parts behave. There's a human element here. And we're oftentimes not exploring the human dynamic, what it means to create together perspectives or goals or even a vision. Also, moving away from generalizing. I talked to a sales enablement person last week, and they were talking about learners and the salespeople. And when I explored it with them, They supported 5 different sales teams. So they were overgeneralizing what these sales teams needed by calling them learners and sales. They weren't even able to talk about the specific differences between these 5 different teams. I think we can deal with a lot of generalization and be obtuse, and it might sound good, but it doesn't help drive the impact. And it also doesn't help us step into our leadership role as orchestrators. Let's talk about moving from project-based to ongoing operations. Project-based focuses on the constraints of the process, the timing, the dependencies, the activities, and micromanaging those. Ongoing operations says, look, we're building out something like a ongoing service, and that ongoing service needs to be managed. We're building out something that is never going away, that isn't turning off, that isn't always ever going to be done. For example, onboarding people better isn't ever really done. Why aren't we thinking about onboarding as an ongoing initiative, an ongoing operation, for example? Then let's talk about moving from pleasing to impactive. Pleasing means taking action based on what other people want, and whoever is the loudest doing what they say, and reacting to challenges, not understanding that those challenges are symptoms that probably have been in play for many weeks and months before they ever became an issue. Versus impactive, defining clear messages that activate others, that say, look, here's the things that I'm seeing. What do you think? Holding up the mirror and saying, look, change starts with me. Here's what I'm thinking about doing. What do you think? And seeing who wants to help and communicating that consistently over time, not just saying, yes, thank you, I will do that. Then let's talk about the next layer, which is this idea of moving from defensive to collaborative. Being defensive, I mean, you might accidentally become defensive in what I'm talking about here. Oh, this doesn't apply to me. This is not something that I'm used to thinking about. That's defensive. Or maybe you're feeling like you're not necessarily, quote unquote, doing the right things. That's defensive as well. That's not what I'm trying to do. What I'm trying to say is, let's be collaborative and produce what we need to produce, not in a way that creates a siloed view, a defensive view that moves us internally, but in a collaborative way that moves us externally to think about all the variables and factors and develop an approach to bring those factors together to determine a path forward, which is more collaborative. And collaborative means we're figuring out how to tackle it together, and all the perspectives are factored in so that we can make an impact that matters for everybody. And those are the aspects of being heroic versus stopped. Your approach to thinking through the right things and thinking through what matters versus thinking through what's coming at you, and reacting versus being proactive. These are trade-offs, and these are decisions that are the essence of being a leader in your business today. The heroic perspective is a leadership mindset. You're going to have to hone it over time. Also, heroic, we talk about it. Scott and I talk about it in 2 different podcasts. If you search for it on the Orchestrate Sales website, you can listen to us discussing the trade-offs in her being heroic, and also why it means being heroic to your executive team. You also may interact with people who have a stopped mindset. You have to have patience with them and bring them along. Don't get frustrated and lash out. The more you integrate and use the heroic perspectives, the more influence you have. Trying these things out to discover what it means to be engineered, to play with what it means to develop and deploy an ongoing operation. These are actions that lead to more influence as a leader. But don't forget that this is a people business. The relationships you have with people matter. They choose to follow you based on what you're doing. So be proactive and forecast situations before they happen. What will happen if you take a specific action? What will likely happen if you don't? Role play these things out, simulate and ask yourself, what will happen if I apply this perspective versus another? And think it through. It's likely you've identified patterns and you've understood what it means to be successful in that view. So that's the lesson one. I hope you took the time to fill out your workbook. Let's continue with lesson 3 and lesson 2. Let's continue with lesson 2.